Hey, everybody, we're just outside of 2 weeks before the National Football League player selection meeting in Kansas City. Got my hotel picked out. We're just outside of 2 weeks before the National Football League player selection meeting in Kansas City. Got my hotel picked out. And my friend and Zennie 62 Media drafts, NFL draft specialist, Bill Carroll is here. Bill?
Yes.
Looking dapper as usual. How are you?
Thank you, sir. Well, it is, getting close to being done with all of it, right? We're getting close to finding out who's right and who's wrong, and who is, whistling up their sleeve and all those kind of old-fashioned expressions. Who's a snake oil salesman, who's a balderdash vendor, and all that kind of stuff. But we are deep into lying season, and so at this point, a lot of the things you're hearing are things that are, if not intentional disinformation, are unintentional disinformation. But either way, I don't trust much of what's being bandied about at this point in the process.
So let's talk about this doggone thing called an S2 test, which happened to pop to my attention on Twitter not too long ago today. And it's interesting that people are having these, if you will, takes. Here's one example that particularly caught my eye. Let me get rid of this one. I'm going to play part of it.
How much do you think we're in this world now where I think it's fair to say there's a top four quarterbacks in this particular class, the Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, Will Levis, and Anthony Richardson. Bryce Young is reported to have off the charts numbers by this. I think Will Levis was supposed to be right behind him with this mid-90s score. How much do you think, given the current landscape, given how much teams currently use this, it could be used as a separator for these guys amongst, NFL draft room?
And he's talking about something called the S2 test. All right. And apparently one person said he scored really, really well, but then Mike Lombardi turned around and said he didn't. And Bill, I actually looked up the S2 test.
Yeah, I'm familiar with it. Mm-hmm.
So tell me what you think about it, because, well, go ahead. Please.
So it is 9 cognitive skills that are tested in about a 30 to 45 minute time period to measure perception speed, search efficiency, tracking capability, visual learning, instinctive learning, also decision complexity, distraction control, impulse control, and improvisation, right? So those are the 9 things that are evaluated. And what it does is it's intended to give you an idea of not only what kind of decision maker this person is and the accuracy of the decision making, but even sort of the why behind the how they make decisions. It's built in that intersection between the physical and the mental. The area of psychometrics is also built in there as well. It's not as new as people are treating it. It's been around for a little while. Front office personnel and scouts have been using it, some more often than others. Some swear by it. Some just sort of put it in the mix with other things. But it's been used with elite level athletes in multiple sports, not just football, for quite some time. And it's trying to find the cognitive strengths and weaknesses, but perhaps more importantly, like I said, drilling into how they got there, right? How did they get to this point in their strengths and weaknesses? It's not like any other metric or test. It's not a be-all or an end-all. It's not going to tell you everything. While more often than not, high-scoring quarterbacks have better outcomes than low-scoring quarterbacks, and even other positions as well, there are some quarterbacks who scored very well who didn't work out, and vice versa. But going back to the early days of testing, so from the first years, of course, there's test data to this day, to now today, there's the quarterback score is about, so this is, once again, it gets sort of into statistical modeling, but in terms of how predictive it is or isn't, for reference, completion percentage is about 13.5% of a passer rating, right? And in terms of its predictiveness, it is more predictive than some things, but way less predictive than others. So using a regression model, the S2 test found, or assessment found, that a quarterback score accounts for about 28.7% of their career passing rating, meaning that about a quarter of their passing rating can be predicted or explained by their S2 score. So a little over 25% of the time. The Wonderlic, in terms of predictive value, is 1/100th of 1% accuracy as a predictor of completion percentage. So the Wonderlic is an incredibly non-predictive test for quarterback success. And for instance, as Daniel Jeremiah sort of alluded to, they might throw 6 shapes at you very, very quickly, and you need to identify the one different one and then hit the little thing indicating, which shape is the different shape of the 6 shapes that are thrown at you. And
sounds like a test I had 2 nights ago.
Right. So they want to see also how quickly you can recall certain things, how you find certain patterns, finding the highlighted thing as it moves around the screen, tracking it, and then picking out a particular shape and highlighting it, and how quickly you can decide which thing upon which you focus, right? When they throw a bunch of different things at you, they want to know your discernment, basically, how well you sift through the noise to find the signal, for lack of a way of putting it. And unlike the Wonderlic, it doesn't pretend to measure intelligence. It tells you, in fact, that it's not an intelligence test. It is a perception and pattern discernment and sort of filtering kind of test. They want to know how quickly and how accurately you can decide which of these things is a thing to focus on. And so because of that, because it doesn't work about, cognition in the sense of calculation, or cognition in the sense of, finding the most important part of a written sentence, or things like that, which are not things that are applicable to what you're doing when the ball is snapped on a football field. They're trying to be closer to that. So the post-snap process of going through the sort of if-then questions that have to be answered in hundredths or sometimes even thousandths of a second, this is something that is more helpful. So the baseline test is sort of Drew Brees, right? So Drew Brees, slightly past the midpoint of his career, went through the S2 test. And in terms of, he sort of set the curve, particularly in instinctive learning. They use him as the barometer for the instinctive learning part of the test. They've tested at this point thousands of athletes in multiple sports from about 9 different sports. And the reason that people are so attracted to it at the quarterback position is because it's the hardest position in any sport to evaluate. It's hard to evaluate in point guards in basketball, shortstops in baseball, or other positions in football. It's an incredibly difficult position to evaluate. So when you know someone's tracking capacity, their instinctive learning and pattern recognition, even if you don't always find correlations between all 3, if someone is very high in those 3, even if they aren't as high in the other things, you usually have a pretty decent feeling of what you're dealing with. So think of how much seeing flashes of color and deciding what to do based on where those flashes of color are in space. Because that's what you're doing as a football player, particularly as a quarterback. You're seeing flashes of color out of the peripheral. You're seeing flashes of color in front of you, and sometimes, coming at you directly. Yeah. And you're making a decision, a very quick decision about what to do in those situations based on those things. So that's what we're talking about.
I found this on the website of the maker of this test, this S2, this evaluation, as they put it. And I thought what they said was interesting. And excuse me for a second, because for some particular reason, I had this and I have that. Oh, I have to add it to the stream. There we go. Hey, come on, Zennie, get with it. S2 overview. I'm going to zoom in on this because I thought it was quite fascinating because it told me a slightly different point of view than what I got from the other folks outside of you, which is more closer to what they're telling me, and which is why you're Dr. Bill, not Chakas. But anyway,
Right.
S2 overview. S2 technology platform brings visibility to an athlete's cognitive skill sets and identifies their strengths and weaknesses and the whys behind their performance. Here's how the process works. You take the evaluation, 30-minute or 45-minute evaluation on a specialized laptop computer, which is what I thought, okay. And then that measures how they process and make split-second decisions in their sport. 2, get your S2 score report. Results are instantly revealed in a detailed report featuring the individual scores of the athlete's abilities, analyzing each of their strengths and weaknesses along with their overall S2 score. All right. But then really got me after all that, okay, where it says learn more is it reads S2 cognition. All right. Helps athletes build to win at all levels across 9 sports by showing them how to work smarter on the field, court, and ice. Our training has helped college and pro teams during their world championship seasons. And Bill, that's what got me about the whole thing. I thought, wait a minute, they're taking a training device, okay, and they're referring to it, the media is, as if it's some doggone intelligence test when, as you said, it's not that at all.
No, it's not intended to do that. And in fact, it's intended to move away from the problem with the Wonderlic was developed, as you probably know, to try to find management trainees. That was for business. That was the intention of the Wonderlic. And it's okay. It's decent for that. It's not even the best tool for that, to be perfectly honest, but that's a whole other show. But at least it's a decent tool for finding, especially in like retail environments, financial services, things like that. It's a decent tool, but it's not the best even. But it has little to nothing to do with anything you'll ever do on a football field,
right,
unless you decide, to your next career is as an agent. It's probably literally better for sussing out who might work out as an agent than who might work out as a player.
I think it stinks. I just think it stinks because, look, the Wonderlic, it's not even about the Wonderlic. It's about the inability of the industry to come up with football-specific tests that are done with respect to what the player is going to experience on the field in these different situations. It's like they're just mailing it in, and here's the latest technology to use to make them sound smart about evaluating players when they, in point of fact, have no freaking idea what they're talking about. I mean, this S2 test, you're testing a quarterback behind a laptop and that person's decision-making when, not you, but euphemistically, right. But when you tell me, right? But then as Mark Lombardi chortling on about those is kind of like, okay? And I'm sorry, folks. Lombardi's, let me give you a taste of Lombardi if I can without getting into a copyright situation here. I'm not going to do that because I might get into one. I don't want to do that. My point is that very simply, Lombardi made some comments about Stroud that said that CJ Stroud was hard to coach. And he tied it in with what he seemed to imply was a poor S2 score. But in point of fact, his S2 score actually was pretty good from what I read. But the whole point is, I'm not looking at this as good or bad because when I read what the manufacturer is telling me, there's no such thing as good or bad. It's just like, it's just, okay, he needs to work on this versus that. And so I think the NFL teams that are using this and communicating this garbage to the media owe the public an apology, because those people who are quoting this, it's like, well, what are you really trying to do, dude? I mean, if you don't know football, just say you don't know football, but just don't throw this stuff out. I think the one thing that should be done every year is everybody that covers the NFL should have to take a chalk talk test where you're going up against the coach. You've got a whiteboard. You can get offense or defense. They have to stop what you're doing or vice versa, right? And the idea really is to see if you can think about football, if you can draw a play, if you know what it is that you're looking at. Never done that stuff. I mean, I tear everybody on the part, frankly. But the whole point is, because I think I'm that kind of guy, I'm happy to be wrong. But my point, you know what I'm saying, Bill? It just upsets me. It's like, why is this coming up all of a sudden in the era of the black elite quarterback?
Yeah, well, I mean, there you can either look at the rain clouds or this little silver lining. The silver lining is that at least 14 teams have decided to de-emphasize, and more will, the Wonderlic, which was an absolute terrible way to try to measure whatever they thought they were measuring. It wasn't a good measure of any of the things they thought they were measuring. And while there are certainly valid criticisms that can be made of this particular tool, it is much more applicable to the types of things one at least does on a football field. At least it's closer. It's measurably, demonstrably closer, and is proven to be much more predictive of success. I mean, a lot of teams do.
That's the question, though. Wouldn't it be better if they just simply presented it and said, okay, here are the strengths and weaknesses of each player as we found them, right? So it gives us a better picture of the player rather than this binary good or bad situation, which really is not honest to what the evaluation does. It's not even a test. They call it an evaluation. They do it for a reason.
Right.
You know, they're not
Right.
doing binary things. So why? So
Right.
It's maddening, Bill. You see what I'm getting at?
Right. Well, both Brandon Allen and Scott Wiley have done what they can to try to get people to move away from, as you said, having this sort of zero-sum, Manichaean dualist approach to something that is the opposite. It's more like going into Baskin Robbins and someone saying, is that good ice cream or bad ice cream? Well, I mean, it depends. What do you like? Right? I mean, a person can be really strong in certain areas and have other areas where their recognition of certain things or their ability to track certain things isn't as strong. And it doesn't mean that they're unable to learn, right? Because the whole, as was even pointed out, it was originally developed as a performance enhancement tool. It wasn't the measurement part of it was to set a baseline. It wasn't to say this person is good or this person is bad. It was to say this person is really strong in these areas and these areas are opportunities for growth. And here's how we train you to get better in these areas.
So
that's the original point of the tool. That's originally what it was intended to do. But now they have data on over 40,000 different athletes from, everything from, cricket bowlers, literally cricket bowlers, right, from England, to pro golfers, to, name us, like I said, 9 sports from all over the place. And they have enough data that they at least, it's still early, but enough data to notice at least predictive trends. That's all good and helpful. But as you just pointed out, it's still not intended to do anything that's exactly football specific. It is good, however, at knowing what someone's cognition patterns are. That's really what it's good at. It shows you this, this person is able to do this at a higher level than this person or at a lower level than this person.
So to close it out, because I promised 20 minutes.
Okay.
Let me know what you think. Is this a big deal issue or little deal or no deal?
I mean, it's not no deal because everything matters. If I've learned one thing about player evaluations, everything matters. Some things matter way more than others, but everything matters. So if I know that this person tracks moving objects not as well as this person tracks moving objects, that's something I would like to know. And that comes up in virtually every sport. Tennis, hockey, baseball. I mean, maybe not so much golf, but tennis, definitely for tennis, and football. Moving objects are all over the place. So I do want to know things like that. I do want to know if this person picks up differences between this fast-moving types of information. Now, once again, the way they test it, it's, they tear like a little piece off of a bunch of diamonds that are moving through space, and you have to pick which part of the diamond is missing. Oh, this one's missing this is missing that kind of thing. So it's still not really super specified, but I get enough information about how this person's mind does work that I can start to build the way I want to teach this athlete, right?
Yeah.
I still think that its best usage is as a way of baselining where this person is when you first get them in your program, and then looking at them 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, a year from now.
So next time I come back, I want you to go through a particular position, the offensive line, in your top 5.
Okay.
So we'll do that, folks. So, Bill, thank you very much for your time. Stick around in the background. Folks,
Sure.
Subscribe to Zennie62. We're going to do an NFL draft live stream, too, during the draft. We're going to have our room with all your favorite Zennie62 vloggers.
Yep.
We'll be on site, as it looks right now, for just 3 days and 2 nights. That's all I can make, and I come back and be with my dear old mom. And that's the way it should be. So anyway, stick around in the background, folks. Hey, everybody, if you're viewing this, please subscribe to Zennie62. Oh, and by the way, we're taking sponsorships and investments and donations for our NFL draft coverage. You want to part with a little $5 here or $2 there? Send them our way. Thanks a lot. We'll see you. All right. Well, hey, even $50 or $500, even better. That's a sponsorship. That ends this broadcast. See ya.